Hey everybody, it was brought to my attention that the video for chapter 5 sort of stopped at the end of this present progressive, so I want to pick up here. Basically, present progressive is a two-part verb phrase to say that things are happening. She is walking, they are dancing, I am swimming. The first part is going to be using estar, so conjugate that for whoever is doing the action, the subject, and then turn the second part into the ing, the gerund, the progressive. That's really easy to do. If it's an AR verb like hablar, add ando. So it's like hablando, estoy hablando, tú estás hablando. The second part is the same, doesn't matter the subject. The estar is what changes for subjects. And then if it's an ER or IR verb, it goes to yendo. So, ella está escuchando. Javier está estudiando. And just keep in mind, Spanish uses this less often than English. For Spanish, it really needs to be an action that is ongoing at the moment. You wouldn't say things like, I'm leaving at 3, unless you have your keys in your hand and you go, right now, I am leaving. If you're not doing it at the moment, just use the regular old present tense. Okay? Now we go to ser and estar. We saw a little bit of this in chapter 2. Here they just sort of flesh it out. The short answer to the question of what's the difference between ser and estar is, all right, this isn't perfect, but ser generally answers what someone or something is like. If I go, tell me about your cousin, what's he like? You would tell me things that are typically true. You would say his profession, you'd say where he's from, you'd talk about his personality, you might say what he looked like. Um, those are all things that go with ser. What is this person like generally? Or what is this place like generally, typically? What are its traits and characteristics? Um, Estar is more the status of someone or something. How are they doing? Where are they located? What's happening right now? With estar, context affects your answer. Context is what is going on in the background. Um, the context doesn't affect where you're from or what you're like. Context does affect how you feel, where you're located. For how you feel and where you are, always use the verb estar. For everything else, use ser. Some people say ser is permanent and estar is temporary. That doesn't always work. But the short answer is ser is what is it like, estar is its status, how it's doing, how it's feeling. And here they go, they tell you that certain adjectives typically go with ser, certain adjectives typically go with estar, but sometimes you can mix and match to different effects. So read these and see that there's a difference in meaning with some. But the easy answer, the short answer is what's the difference between ser and estar? Ser comments on what people are like, estar comments on how people are feeling. And so an example I give for this one is, let's assume El Señor Medina is your grandfather, he's your abuelito, and his picture's on your mantle. Somebody goes, oh, that's your grandpa? Tell me about him. When you describe him, you're going to typically say, he is from California, he is a doctor, he is kind and tall and old and fat and thin, he is intelligent, he is all these things. Those are characteristics of him. But if we take a snapshot of him in the airport at his worst, he is upset, he is shouting, he is in the airport, he is angry. Those are all his status. Those can all be answered with why. Well, because he's in an airport, because it's busy, because his flight got canceled. Same thing with the little girl. She is young, she is pretty, she is short. On the other hand, she is crying, she is upset, she is sad. One is her status, and then one is her general inherent characteristics. And then the last grammar point from chapter 5 is really something different. It's the idea of direct objects and then direct object pronouns. So a direct object receives the action of the verb directly. So the way that you find if your sentence has a direct object is to first find the verb, and based on the verb, ask who or what. So Jimena is reading a book. Find the verb. Jimena is reading who? No. She is reading what? Yes. Something answers that question. Book. is your direct object. I listen to the professor. I listen to who? Professor. They visit the museum. They visit what? The museum. So fairly easily you can find if your sentence has a direct object. If your sentence has a direct object and you want to replace it with a pronoun, that's called a direct object pronoun. So, for example, if instead of saying she's reading a book, you might say she's reading it. I know the professor, I know him. Sentences like he sees me and I know you, those are direct object pronouns, the me and the you. So the first thing you want to do is find your direct object if you have one, and then replace it with one of these. These agree with the direct object, not the subject. So Felipe compra el pasaje. He buys the ticket. If I want to say he buys it, I look down here to see which one of these best represents el pasaje. It is singular and masculine, so I'm going to pick lo. And then when I replace it, you typically put it before the verb. So that's a little bit different. It's kind of like saying he, it buys. Maribel, them makes. Um, Typically that's true. Just put it right before the verb. Katia has them. Armando no doesn't me listen. You can attach it to the end of the verb like they did here and here and here, but you can only attach it to the second verb if you have a verb phrase, a compound verb, such as necesitar, tener, ir, or one of those present progressives we just learned. But you can only do that with two verbs. You can always just put it up front. So what I advise students is after you make your replacement, just put it up front because you can do that if you have one verb or two. So direct objects are